Dean Corll. He was known as the Candyman, a seemingly ordinary man. He lived a seemingly ordinary life. But beneath the surface, a darkness lurked. A darkness that would consume the lives of at least 28 young boys in the early 1970s. Corll's horrific crimes shocked Houston, Texas. They shocked the nation. He became one of America's most notorious serial killers. His name forever etched in the annals of criminal history. Corll's case was particularly chilling. He preyed on vulnerable young boys. He lured them to their deaths with promises of candy and parties. He was a master manipulator. He knew how to exploit the innocence of youth. His crimes were heinous. His methods were brutal. Corll's story is a terrifying reminder of the evil that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most unassuming individuals. "28. That's the number of confirmed victims. 28 young lives extinguished by Dean Corll's depravity. The actual number may be even higher. These boys, aged 13 to 20, disappeared without a trace. Their families were left with unanswered questions. They were left with unimaginable pain. How could this happen? How could someone get away with such unspeakable acts for so long? The disappearances plagued Houston for years. A climate of fear settled over the community. Parents were afraid to let their children out of their sight. The thought of a monster preying on their children was unbearable. How could Dean Corll operate undetected for so long? How could he maintain this facade of normalcy while committing such horrific acts? These are the questions that continue to haunt investigators and the public to this day. Dean Corll was born on December 24, 1939, in Fort Wayne, Indiana. His childhood was far from idyllic. His parents had a tumultuous relationship. This unstable home environment left a lasting impact on young Dean. Corll's parents divorced when he was 6. Mary took Dean and his brother to Memphis, Tennessee. She remarried and opened a small candy shop. Dean, a shy child, helped out at the shop. This earned him the nickname, the Candyman. By adolescence, Dean Corll's cracks began to show. He developed an interest in macabre subjects. This fascination was a dark prelude to future horrors. Dean completed high school in Veeder, Texas, drafted into the Army in 1964. His military time was unremarkable, stationed at Fort Benning and Fort Hood. Disturbing tendencies surfaced more openly. Fellow soldiers recalled his strange behavior. Discharged in 1965, Dean returned to Houston. He resumed working for his family's candy business. On the surface, his life appeared stable. Dean was dedicated to the family business, but his dark desires were growing stronger. His return marked the beginning of deviant behavior, hosting teenage boys, offering candy and parties. These gatherings covered his darker intentions. His need for control had terrifying consequences. As Dean Corll's dark desires intensified, he found a way to indulge them under the guise of a seemingly harmless hobby. He began to enjoy photography, particularly taking pictures of the young boys who frequented his apartment. This hobby was anything but innocent. It was a way for Dean to satisfy his predatory instincts. Dean's apartment became a hub for local teenagers. He lured them with promises of candy, alcohol, and drugs. The boys saw him as a generous, albeit strange, older friend. They had no idea of the horrors that awaited them. Dean Corll's descent into darkness was not a solitary journey. In 1971, he met Elmer Wayne Henley, a teenage boy who would become an integral part of his horrific crimes. Henley, who was just 15 at the time, came from a troubled background. His family was poor, and he had a strained relationship with his father. These factors made him vulnerable to Corll's manipulative charm. Henley was initially unaware of Corll's dark side. Dean presented himself as a friendly, charismatic man who could offer Henley and his friends a good time. He lured them with promises of money, alcohol, and drugs. Henley's initial attraction to Corll was not unusual. Many young boys were drawn to the older man who seemed so generous and fun-loving. Corll quickly recognized Henley's potential as an accomplice. He began to groom the teenager, gradually revealing his true nature. Henley was initially horrified by Corll's confessions of murder, but Corll's manipulative tactics and promises of money eventually won him over. Henley was drawn into Corll's twisted world, becoming both a participant and a victim of his manipulation. Henley's involvement marked a turning point in Corll's criminal activities. With Henley's help, Corll was able to expand his operations, luring more victims with greater ease. Henley, desperate for money and approval, became an eager accomplice, helping Corll in his gruesome tasks and ensuring that the horrors would continue unabated. Before Henley, there was David Brooks. Brooks was Corll's first teenage accomplice, recruited in 1969 when he was just 14 years old. Like Henley, Brooks came from a troubled background. His family life was unstable and he often sought escape on the streets of Houston. Corll, always on the lookout for vulnerable boys, saw an opportunity in Brooks. Brooks and Corll's relationship started similarly to Henley's. Corll showered Brooks with attention, money, and gifts, effectively grooming him for his sinister purposes. Over time, Corll began to reveal his dark side, and Brooks, much like Henley, was initially repulsed. However, Corll's promises of financial gain and the twisted thrill of participation overcame Brooks's initial reluctance. Brooks's role in Corll's crimes was crucial. He helped lure numerous boys to Corll's apartment, using his friendships and connections to gain their trust. Brooks's involvement was more than just that of an accomplice. He was deeply embedded in Corll's world, part of a twisted family bound by horrific secrets and shared guilt. The dynamic between Corll, Brooks, and later Henley was complex. While both boys were victims of Corll's manipulation, they also became willing participants in his crimes. This blurred line between victim and perpetrator added another layer of horror to the already gruesome saga, showcasing Corll's ability to corrupt and control those around him. With both Henley and Brooks under his influence, Dean Corll formed a deadly trio that would terrorize Houston. They became his primary means of capturing new victims, using friendships to lure unsuspecting teenagers to Corll's lair. Henley and Brooks knew the dangerous game they were playing. Despite their fear, they continued to aid Corll. Driven by money, manipulation, or loyalty, they remained by his side. Corll's apartment, a house of horrors, was meticulously maintained. The boys were adept at covering their tracks. This partnership allowed Corll to continue his killing spree unchecked. Together, they formed a perverse family bound by blood and horror. Dean Corll's method of selecting and capturing his victims was methodical and terrifying. With Henley and Brooks as his scouts, Corll created a network to trap unsuspecting boys. He invited the boys to his apartment with the promise of a party. Once there, they were plied with alcohol or drugs. Corll would restrain his victims, rendering them powerless. The boys endured unimaginable torture. This systematic hunt continued for years, with each victim becoming another notch in Corll's grim tally. The true extent of Corll's atrocities was only revealed after his reign of terror ended. As the body count rose, so did suspicion. Whispers of a predator stalking Houston's streets began to circulate. Parents grew increasingly anxious, warning their children about the dangers lurking in the shadows. The disappearances, once isolated incidents, now formed a chilling pattern, too frequent and too similar to ignore. The victims, all young boys, seemed to vanish into thin air. Their families, desperate for answers, plastered missing person posters across the city. Each poster, bearing the face of a lost son, brother, or friend, served as a grim reminder of the invisible threat that haunted Houston. Law enforcement, under mounting pressure to find the culprit, faced a daunting task. The disappearances, while sharing similarities, lacked concrete leads. The victims came from different backgrounds, had different social circles, yet met the same tragic end. The lack of a clear motive or connection between the victims made the investigation even more challenging. The whispers of a serial predator grew louder, fueled by fear and speculation. Rumors spread like wildfire, each more outlandish than the last. Yet, amidst the noise and conjecture, a horrifying truth lay hidden, waiting to be unearthed. The clock was ticking, and each passing day brought with it the chilling possibility of another life lost. A palpable sense of fear gripped Houston. Parents became increasingly wary, reluctant to let their children out of their sight. The once familiar streets now seemed menacing, potential hunting grounds for an unseen predator. The carefree innocence of youth was replaced by a pervasive anxiety, a constant reminder of the lurking danger. The disappearances became a constant topic of conversation, a morbid fascination that reflected the growing unease. Theories abounded, some plausible, others bordering on the absurd. Yet none could fully explain the chilling efficiency with which the boys vanished, leaving behind only a void of unanswered questions. The police, despite their best efforts, seemed powerless to stop the disappearances. The lack of progress fueled public frustration and distrust. Accusations of incompetence and indifference were leveled at law enforcement, adding to the pressure on an already overwhelmed system. Amidst the fear and uncertainty, a sense of helplessness prevailed. The community, once a vibrant tapestry of life, now seemed to hold its breath, united in fear but divided by suspicion. The monster in their midst remained elusive, casting a long shadow over Houston, a constant reminder of their collective vulnerability. In retrospect, there were missed opportunities, fleeting moments when the darkness surrounding Dean Corll could have been pierced. Reports of suspicious activity near his residence, whispers of his strange behavior with young boys, these warning signs, though seemingly insignificant at the time, could have altered the course of events. One instance involved a concerned neighbor who reported seeing Corll and Henley carrying a large, heavy toolbox late one night. The neighbor, disturbed by the sight, considered contacting the police but ultimately decided against it, dismissing it as late-night tinkering. This seemingly innocuous observation, had it been investigated, could have uncovered the gruesome contents of the toolbox and brought Corll's reign of terror to an abrupt end. Another near miss involved a teenager who managed to escape Corll's clutches. The boy, after enduring hours of torture, seized a moment of opportunity when Corll's guard was down and fled into the night. Traumatized and fearing for his life, he chose not to report the incident to the police, fearing retribution from Corll and his accomplices. This missed chance at exposing Corll's crimes allowed him to continue preying on unsuspecting victims. These missed opportunities, these near misses, would later haunt investigators and the community alike. They served as stark reminders of how close they came to unmasking Corll and the tragic consequences of failing to connect the dots. Despite setbacks, the investigation into the Houston disappearances pressed on. A tip from a former associate of Corll pointed investigators in his direction. Police began discreet surveillance of Corll's residence. They observed young boys entering but not leaving. The net was tightening around Dean Corll. The final act in this tragic saga was about to unfold. August 8, 1973, a sweltering night in Houston. Elmer Wayne Henley, Rhonda Williams, and Timothy Curley were at Corll's apartment. Corll, agitated, accused Henley of breaking their pact. In a fit of rage, Corll pulled out a gun. Henley, backed into a corner, knew he had to act quickly. The night was about to spiral into a bloody confrontation. Chaos erupted. Henley lunged for the gun. A struggle ensued. Shots rang out, ending Corll's reign of terror. Henley, hands shaking, stood over Corll's lifeless body. The sound of sirens pierced the night. The nightmare was over, but the true horror was just beginning. News of Corll's death and Henley's confession spread rapidly. Henley led investigators through Corll's world of cruelty. He described the torture chamber and burial sites. Each revelation sent shockwaves through the community. The investigation uncovered a horrifying truth. Corll's apartment was now a gruesome crime scene. Guided by Henley, investigators descended upon the boat shed. Bodies of young boys were unearthed, wrapped in plastic. 28 confirmed dead, identities pieced together. The boat shed was now a mass grave. The discovery sent shockwaves throughout the nation. Dean Corll became one of America's most notorious serial killers. The news of Corll's death and the discoveries that followed shocked Houston. Families of the victims faced the unimaginable task of piecing their lives back together. The community struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the tragedy. Trust was eroded, replaced by suspicion and vulnerability. The aftermath extended far beyond the immediate families. Houston was forced to confront its darkest demons. Focus shifted to Corll's accomplices, Henley and Brooks. Henley claimed self-defense, arguing he acted to save lives. Brooks maintained he was coerced by Corll. The trials captivated the nation, raising complex questions. The jury faced the daunting task of delivering justice. The verdicts would have far-reaching implications. The legacy of Corll's crimes extended beyond courtrooms. Families of the victims faced constant reminders of their loss. The community underwent profound introspection. Houston implemented new safety measures and awareness programs. The case highlighted the importance of early intervention. It served as a grim reminder of the evil that can lurk beneath the surface. The memory of Corll's victims lives on. They were more than just names, they were sons, brothers, friends. Memorials stand as reminders of the human cost of Corll's crimes. The fight for justice continues for all victims of evil. The legacy of Corll is a dark stain, but also a reminder of resilience. By remembering the lost, we can prevent future tragedies. The story of Dean Corll challenges us to consider the vulnerabilities predators exploit. The painful legacy is felt by the families of his victims. Houston carries the scars of Corll's reign of terror. Changes in policing and community awareness are part of his dark legacy. The case highlighted gaps in handling missing persons cases. Insights gained contribute to understanding serial killers and their accomplices. Remembering the victim shifts focus from the perpetrator. They deserve to be remembered for who they were. Community vigilance is crucial in safeguarding the vulnerable. Engagement and education can better protect our youth. Proactive measures honor the memory of Corll's victims. Together we can transform darkness into a beacon of hope and resilience.